Good afternoon, everybody. In today's talk, I'm going to present our paper, Residual Networks for Resisting Noise, Analysis of an Embeddings-based Spoofing Countermeasure. With the increasing naturalness of text-to-speech and voice conversion methods, there is a growing need for spoofing countermeasures. It is more difficult to tell apart natural speech audio signals from fake, computer-generated, computer-synthesized audio signals. The ongoing ASVSpoof challenge series has resulted in rapid progress towards this aim. There are some open challenges, however. The performance of spoofing countermeasures in realistic noise has received little research attention so far. It hasn't been really tested that these architectures, especially narrow architectures, are robust to noise. What we also don't know is how the acoustic information in these speech signals are actually exploited by these neural networks, because we cannot really look into the black box of these neural networks. So in this study, we propose a new dilated ResNet GMM spoofing countermeasure, and we compare its performance to the ASVSpoof 2019 baseline. We do a detailed analysis of performance in various types of realistic noise scenarios, and we also attempt to look into the black box of neural networks through the visualization of embeddings, and by also showing two methods to generate explainable audio examples. In this slide, I'm going to show you our proposed model. This is based on a dilated ResNet architecture, which we are going to name CQT-DNN from now on. We are going to propose a modification to this architecture inspired by the popular X-vector chain, which basically exploits the idea of training on the embeddings of the DNN. What we do is basically in this last layer, we acquire the embeddings, the hidden units of the neural network, and we use a GMM here to differentiate between spoof and real speech examples. This has a slight advantage in some scenarios where we want to get a confidence value, how confident our system about its decision, because we are able to obtain a likelihood ratio or an actual softness score. So if we want, with this GMM-based approach, we can implement a rejection-based scheme. Our neural network follows a simply ResNet-based architecture. It uses a CQT feature in the beginning, followed by convolutional layers, each having skip connections to allow the training of more layers. The green layers represent the pooling layers, which are needed because of the downsampling process that's needed. And then finally, a traditional fully convolutional network, which connects and learns a function based on the learned filter banks. First, I show the noiseless performance of the architectures. We can see that overall, a fusion architecture performed best. This fusion architecture we call subfusion, and it is actually a fusion of the LFCC-GMM, the CQCC-GMM, and the CQT-GMM-DNN architectures. We can see that each has different performance on the different classwise error performances. I'm going to tell you how we created the noisy spoof dataset for our noise analysis. We have sampled a subset of the ASVSpoof 2019 logical axis data in a balanced way. And by balance, we mean that each class is equally represented in this subsample dataset. Then we added different kind of noises to this dataset. These realistic noises were from a dataset called Muson, and these were added at the signal-to-noise ratio level of 5 decibels. From the Muson dataset, we selected 3 kinds of noises. A speech noise, which were from a random selection of 3 to 6 speakers, the music noise scenario, and a noise scenario. So this corresponds to the noises in the Muson dataset. Additionally, we have generated pink noises also at the level of a signal-to-noise ratio of 5 decibels. Reverberation was applied using simulated room impulse responses from another dataset called RYR. Here you can see a table summarizing the performance of our architectures and the baseline. What we can see is that on the noiseless scenario, the sum fusion performs the best. What we can also see is that there is some kind of trade-off between the CQT-DNN and the CQT-DNN system. The CQT-DNN performing best on the all-noise scenario, while the CQT-DNN performs best on the noiseless scenario. The performance interchangeably is a marginally worse for the noise and the noiseless scenarios. What we can also observe is that both neural-based architectures actually overperform the GMM-based architectures, both in the noisy and the noiseless scenarios. We can see a similar picture represented in a different way by looking at these depth curves. Sum fusion performs best in the noiseless scenario. The noiseless scenario is shown with these dotted lines, while the noisy scenario is shown with these straight, not dotted lines. Overall, we can see the same picture here. The CQT-DNN is the most robust to spoofed audio, and the CQT-GMM-DNN performs marginally worse than CQT-DNN in noise, but marginally better in a noiseless scenario. To further analyze the trained systems, we do a visualization of the CQT-DNN embeddings, first using PCA. What we can see is that the spoof audios completely separate from the bona fide and the VC examples. But there is a significant overlap between the VC examples and the bona fide examples. This explains the poor detection performance with some VC classes because they cannot be separated linearly in this 2D space. We can also see the same picture using a t-stochastic neighbor embedding method. This is an alternative to PCA using a KL distance-based approach instead of a maximum variance-based approach. The results are consistent with the PCA results. Both methods show the overlap between the VC and the bona fide classes. We have further explored the visualization of these embeddings on the effect of noise. In this case, what's the effect of reverberation on the embeddings? You can see that the blue point cloud, the red point cloud, and the green point cloud represents the same experimental conditions as before. The pink point cloud is the sample subset of the bona fide samples, and the purple point cloud is the sample subset of the spoof examples. What we see is that by adding the reverberation, these samples get attracted closer to the decision threshold. But all in all, they are still on the right side of the decision boundary. This means that our architecture is robust to reverberation. And what we can also observe is a similar pattern in other noise scenarios. Now I'm going to explain our explainable audio approaches. Our first approach that we did was using GradCAM. GradCAM basically allows us to obtain a sensitivity map based on a speech example, showing us which parts of an image or which parts of a spectrogram the neural network is most sensitive to or most salient to. In the first step, we acquire the CQT spectrogram. These were the features that we have used with our neural networks. In the second step, we obtain the sensitivity map using our GradCAM approach. By thresholding this map, we are able to obtain a binary mask. This is basically a binary mask of which parts of the spectrogram should be the most important. Then we can multiply together the binary mask with our CQT spectrogram to obtain the parts of the spectrogram which are the most important. This can be normalized and then fed to a Griffin recorder to obtain a reconstructed audio waveform. I'm going to show an example now how this actually sounds like in a certain class.
I go through the whole season with them. We are a team that is capable of creating.
It will be hard to leave a place as exciting as that after 3 years in it.
It will be hard to leave a place as exciting as that after 3 years in it.
So first you have heard the original audio, then you have heard the reconstructed CQT audio, and then you have heard the parts of the audio that were most sensitive. You should have heard a noise, a characteristic noise for this particular type of spoofing category. We have also experimented with another approach that we call a mean audio approach. The idea is that we want to know what type of audio files are more challenging and what type of audio files are less challenging for our neural networks. More challenging means that they are closer to the CM threshold, while less challenging means that they are further from the CM threshold. We exploit that we can group the audio files based on their actual CM scores. By taking the mean of these grouped audios, we can obtain a new audio, which simulates a cocktail party scenario. It forces us to listen to the acoustic parts of the audio instead of the meaning of the audio. I'm going to show you an example of this in the case of A18.
Profile of the European tour to the sky.
Into a number of people.
Already measuring eye of the individual.
Proposals. Is titled.
All in all, you should have heard a particular type of noise more clearly present in the signal as I have played the successive audios. In general, what we observe with the spoof signals is that there is a more rapid, louder onset of speech compared to the non-generated counterparts. You can listen to more audio examples using this QR code or this link. We have also performed some naturalness experiments using ResNet, which is a neural network trained on results of objective naturalness experiments. The neural network basically provides a mean opinion score between 1 to 5 by just feeding an audio to it. What we find by simple regression analysis is that between the mean opinion score and the first principal axis of our PCA of the embeddings, there is an R-squared of 0.315, which means that our spoofing countermeasure actually takes into account the naturalness of the speech signals. Interestingly, with the exception of some classes like A13, A17, A18, and A19, we can see in the table that all spoofed audios are deemed more natural than the actual bona fide, the genuine signals, according to the ResNet. I would like to point out some future work here. We recognize that our GradCAM-based audio has some limitations, namely because the Griffin-Limb vocoder has a relatively poor reconstruction quality for our CQT, limiting the usefulness of our approach overall. In future, a narrow vocoder-based solution could be proposed, which have been shown with fast Fourier transforms with normal spectrograms, that they can improve the reconstruction quality. Additionally, we recognize that further analysis with voice activity detection would be essential. But our hypothesis is that in these spoofed audios, the speech rate and the pauses can be actually a very good telling sign whether it is important, whether it is natural or not. But it would be still important to be aware of to what extent these systems rely on non-speech versus verbal cues. Finally, I would like to summarize our work. We wanted to see whether these neural network-based countermeasures are robust to noise. And our conclusion is that these countermeasures, including our proposed architecture, is more robust to noise. Explainable audio that we created offers us a better understanding of what these classifiers do, mainly in the form of showing us what kind of noises, what kind of signals they are sensitive to in our audio file. And finally, we can see that the neural network-based embeddings correlate with the objective naturalness function learned by the ResNet, meaning that our architecture considers the naturalness aspect of the speech signals. Thank you for listening.